Hey, it's Danny Kelly, and it's officially fantasy football season, which means the Ringer Fantasy Football Show is back with the latest news from around the NFL and everything you need to get ready for the fantasy football season. So join us at the Ringer Fantasy Football Show on Spotify or on our new YouTube channel.
Welcome to the Ringer NFL Show. Sheil Kapadia here with Diante Lee and Steven Ruiz. The pads are on. The practice reports are coming in. The quarterback stat debate is raging. It is training camp. We're going to talk about it. Diante, how are we feeling?
I feel good, man. Obviously glad to have you back after, your hiatus in the summer. I don't know if you saw my tweet, but I'm going to be true to form, man. We have got to end this podcast with your Hurts versus Newton take. I've got to hear it. Don't care how milquetoast, don't care how fired up it may be. The Philadelphia sports ecosystem needs this one maybe more than anything else.
You're not going to believe me. You probably think I'm being like Bill Belichick when he names the social. I will actually need a refresher on exactly what the debate is, where it started. But yes, I saw you tweet it. And listen, it got the requisite amount of likes where I think we have to do it because people did, there was some interest in there, Ruiz. So yes, I did. When I was away, I did delete, some of the social media from my phone and tried to get away from it, Ruiz.
It's a true pro right there.
There's no escaping, there's no escaping the debates, Ruiz.
I've honestly tried to keep myself out of the Cam Newton, Jalen Hurts debates. I finally let off a tweet this morning, but it took a while for me to dip my toes.
And that went viral. So you're hitting I saw that tweet. That's incredible. Yeah, that was going all over the place.
I turned off notifications. I checked the likes like an hour ago. I was like, are you guys serious? Is this? I was surprised by that. I didn't think it was that good of a tweet. All
right. So Diante will fill me in. And then I don't even know what the exact question is. So there you go. We'll get to that.
It's long. It is very tangled. Like this thing has probably left the rails, come back and left the rails again on at least 4 different occasions. So it'll be an interesting talk.
I can't promise that it's not going to just be like the end of The Sopranos where you're just going to see my screen go black when you start talking about that. Where's Sheil go? Oh, I guess the podcast is over. So yes, no promises. But let's get to the training camp stuff because I just spent the day looking at stuff that's going on around the league. What matters? What doesn't matter? That's kind of what we're talking about. What nuggets have our attention? Diante, you're writing about this for theringer.com. So why don't you start us off with a training camp nugget that has your attention?
I think that we need to talk about what the Rams season might look like if Matthew Stafford's back problems extend closer to the start of the regular season, and if this is something that's going to dog them throughout the season. So for people who aren't Rams fans who maybe haven't seen it, right, he hasn't really taken any real practices in training camp thus far. The first week he spent most of the time out on the field, but with the training staff, kind of doing some active rehab. And the thought at that time was that by this week, he would be back on the field, at least in some sort of light capacity. And then at the start of the week, Sean McVay puts out a statement, letting everybody know that they're going to go week by week is the timeline that they offered. All they've said so far is that it's back soreness. I think that with most other players, you could take that with a grain of salt and just let it be what it is. But we do have to remember the fact that this guy's had a spinal cord contusion that forced him to miss time in that disaster 2022 season for the Rams. He's had broken bones in his back towards the end of his tenure in Detroit. So we're talking about a guy that is now approaching his late 30s, 2 separate back incidents, and now got some back soreness, stiffness, tightness, however you may want to word it. And the thing that I think that I was kind of most drawn to was that they were very specific about this is only about getting him to week 1, right? And to me, what that sounds like is, hey, we're already put this, whatever this is, it's bad enough that we're basically punting on training camp as is right now. I will be surprised if he takes any real practices from here on out, outside of maybe like some walkthrough stuff. But I kind of wanted to toss it to you guys to get a sense of how seriously are you taking this? And if this is going to be a back issue that dogs them, what does that do for the Rams ceiling? Because we usually view this team as one that gets hot towards the end of the year, and they're obviously going to need Stafford to be healthy to do so.
I was kind of having the same discussion with myself earlier today, and I would have considered myself a Rams optimist coming into training camp in the last couple of weeks. But after this, I'm kind of pumping the brakes on that. It's not just that Matthew Stafford is at this advanced age, and you talked about his injury history. It's like the type of quarterback he is. And I don't know if he could be the type of quarterback that we think of when we think of Matthew Stafford, if that guy is not 100% correct. And if the Rams offensive line has been what it has been since really 2018 at this point, I don't know if he can carry them. Like a back injury is tough to overcome, and back injuries don't tend to get better over time. They tend to get worse. So yeah, I'm sounding the alarm. I'm really worried that we're going to see a lot of Jimmy Garoppolo in this upcoming season.
They're one of the toughest teams, I think, to figure out. Is I'm doing like you guys probably are. Right? Who am I having in the playoffs? Who, getting the predictions already. We have time, but you're starting to think about those things. And the ceiling is not hard to get to. They were a very good team last year. They have a veteran quarterback. You trust the coach. They upgraded the wide receiver. I thought they did some creative things defensively. Good young pass rush. Like in a wide open NFC, I don't think it's very hard to paint a picture where they're competing to get to the Super Bowl. But I'm also a little nervous about this because it's not just this. It is, we can go back to the end of last year where they're going into week 18. I know we've talked about this before, and they said, who cares about the seeding? Let's get Matthew Stafford right. And I think that was the right decision. He had some amazing throws in that game against the Eagles. But even then the offseason where it wasn't like, hey, we're running this back with Stafford. It was like, all right, we don't know if we want to make a financial commitment and go test the trade market. It feels so long ago now, but they have all the information. And if you believe some of the reporting, this even goes back to last offseason where maybe there were some of those discussions about, do we want to commit to Matthew Stafford still? So I think it was a tough decision for them. And I hope he's healthy because he has been so fun to watch and he continues to be so fun to watch. And I feel like if you told me one game he's got to be right for, I feel like he could look like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But to your point, Diante, now we're talking about getting through an 18-week season and then the playoffs. And it almost feels like a load management NBA situation where this is going to be an ongoing story. Maybe we'll be wrong. Maybe we'll get to week 3 and we'll be laughing saying, oh, remember when we were worried about that in late July. But I'm kind of with you that it feels like something that might not be going away and that they have to monitor kind of all season long.
I don't think it's going away. And the name that I thought of when I was reading the initial reporting was Tony Romo. Like, I don't know if you guys remember when he had initial herniated disc and then the transverse back injury, and he ended up getting surgery. And it was just not the same, right? And I'm not saying like Tony Romo was mobile, like functionally mobile. He was not he wasn't the best at running around and extending, but he lost that part of his game after back surgery a bit. And then you could just see every hit. You just felt like you were crossing your fingers that the dude was going to get back up. And he just kind of succumbed, I think, to the impacts that you have to take to be a true pocket passing NFL quarterback. I think about the 2022 season, right? And it was a lot of that for Matthew Stafford. The offensive line was breaking down. They were in more obvious passing situations more often, and that meant more hits, right? Like you look at his sack total that year, he basically took as much in that limited amount of time as he has in any full season that he's played for the Rams, kind of in that 28 to 32 range. So I am a bit concerned that, if this is something that lingers going into the season, if he does get blindsided, or maybe he tries to make a throw deep down the field and he tweaks his back. Or to your point, Sheil, right? Like you said, we talked a lot about that going into the playoffs, that he basically needed week 18 as his kind of de facto first round bye to kind of get his body back right. So that way he could compete at the level that the Rams needed them to make the run that they did. I do think, like Steven said, if there's any hint that there's going to be an issue with this in September and October, I would not be surprised at all if we just start seeing them on Tuesday, basically as soon as practices start opening up. Hey, this is probably not going to be a Matthew Stafford week, or he's going to just start off the weeks every week questionable, and we're just kind of going to be playing this on a week by week basis. And if that's the case, it's going to be hard to look at this Rams offense and expect them to be what we think they can be in the NFC West, and certainly in terms of Super Bowl contention.
Right. It's going to be a big Sean McVay season, I feel like, if Matthew Stafford is on and off the injury report week to week. But like we kind of saw them making those changes down the stretch last year, kind of going back to some of the Jared Goff style of offense. And maybe that was them preparing for life after Matthew Stafford, since like Sheil said, like they were definitely discussing the possibility in January and February. What is your guys' thoughts on their ceiling or floor if let's say Jimmy Garoppolo starts 10 games next year?
Ooh, I feel like we haven't seen him in a bit, right? Jimmy, if he starts 10 games, So you're getting Stafford.
He started, 2 years ago? It wasn't 2 years ago. It feels like long ago.
Yeah,
That's an eternity in the NFL, I guess.
Let me see their schedule. Because part of me wants to say that, like, Sean McVay can go 500 with Jimmy Garoppolo. That's what I want to say.
Kyle went to the Super Bowl. The questionable offensive line. Like, I'm thinking of the 2019 season. Questionable offensive line. Good pieces around him in terms of skill players, but not great ones. I think this Rams team kind of compares to them a little bit. Like, I don't think it's like a wide gap between the 2 through 11 on the offense compared to the 2019 49ers. But I think Jimmy Garoppolo is not 2019 Jimmy Garoppolo.
Right.
Probably.
I think that's
really
thing.
The issue. Yeah.
He's had injuries. What version of Garoppolo are you getting? If he has to play 10 games, can he stay healthy for 10 games? But I don't think you're wrong that they could get to the playoffs if he had to start 10 games. Like, that wouldn't shock me if they went 9-8 or 10-7 and, earned a wild card berth. I don't think that would, if he had to play the whole season, I would not be predicting that. But if you tell me he's got to start half the season, maybe.
Let me ask another question. Over under on Stetson Bennett appearances, 0.5. He's the third string quarterback right now.
Under.
Jimmy couldn't say healthy himself. So I think Sheil alluded to that earlier. So Stafford's
I love Bennett at Georgia. Been to a couple Rams practices. I think if it comes to that, they will be on the market to go bring in another guy as an emergency player. I would be very shocked if it came to
Carson Wentz.
Yeah, we're going to go back to for days.
Yeah, who knows? All right. So Rams a little, I think if you're a Rams fan, I think we said it in the spring. It's like, man, the Rams offseason went great. And I still think it did go great because if they have a bad season, they go into next year's draft with 2 first-round picks. They have young players on defense. They have Puka Nacua, who is a great, so they've got pieces. But this is kind of why I thought it was a great offseason, because you were kind of gearing up for whether you make a run or whether your season goes sideways. You still have a path to kind of getting right back in there next year. So we'll see what happens with Matthew Stafford. Hopefully we get some good reports that he's feeling better, that he's ready to go when the season starts. All right, Ruiz, what do you got? What's your first nugget?
I'm going to go with the Chiefs offensive line and just how that's been shuffled about during training camp. So I think we can lock in Josh Simmons, the number 32 pick in last year's draft, into the left tackle spot. And I think we know Creed Humphrey starting at center, Trey Smith starting at right guard. But it's been interesting how they've been kind of rotating the players at left guard and right tackle. We have Kingsley Sumatia and Jalen Moore essentially going head-to-head at left guard. But then you also have Jalen Moore also competing for the right tackle spot with Jawan Taylor. And then Jawan Taylor this past, I think it was either 2 days ago or yesterday, took a rep at left guard. So we have these 3 players battling it out for 2 spots. And I feel like this is a big deal because I know when we talk about the Chiefs offense and we talk about their passing game and the lack of explosive plays, we talk about the wide receiver personnel. But I really think, like, the more I watch them from last year, I think the offensive line was the issue and was the main issue with them not being able to push the ball downfield because they weren't able to call the plays that we typically see lead to explosive plays for offenses. So I just think this is something, one, they have to get right. They have the Jalen Moore signing has to work out, or the Josh Simmons pick has to work out right away for them to get back to having a good offensive line. And if that doesn't happen, I think we're going to be having the same conversations about this offense that we had last year, regardless of how Rice looks returning and Hollywood Brown looks returning. So I think this is a big thing to monitor as we head into the offseason, or not the offseason, the regular season.
Yeah, it feels like they felt like you do, Ruiz, just with their actions. It's not like they went out and were like, we got to go get a wide receiver. It was like, we are making big changes on the offensive line. Yeah, right. Trading Joe Thuney, drafting Josh Simmons, the big signing with Moore. I will say this with the rookie stuff, and you didn't do this, but I do feel like there's too much like spike in the football with this rookie. I mean, we've literally had a week of practices for a lot of these teams, and it's like, oh, that worked out. What a steal. And I understand with Simmons, it was, check it, check the depth chart. Oh, they're fine there now. We got to learn our lesson on this. Every summer this happens. And so maybe I'm the curmudgeonly old guy saying
you're 100% right.
100%. Yeah.
You look at the recent examples, it's like Rashawn Slater, Tristan Wirfs. You can maybe say, and you could say like Joe Alt as the guys who land in the league. And it's like, all right, you're just going to be our bookend and we're not thinking about it. And then that guy immediately delivers, right? Like, and you look at what Kansas City's offense was last year, the level that not only Josh Simmons, but Kingsley Suamataia would have to be at for you to actually wipe away the problems that they were dealing with in terms of pressures, in terms of the amount of hits that Mahomes was taking, in terms of just how often they would have to create out of structure. Both these guys will basically have to be all pro players. And that's not a reasonable expectation for either of these guys. And you guys know, because we talked about it throughout the draft process, I was pretty high on Josh Simmons. I actually thought that in terms of just grading him out, relative to his peers, he probably should have been a top 15, top 20 pick. Obviously, just the injury that he dealt with at Ohio State, I think kind of knocked him down boards a little bit. So I do think that he'll be fine, but expecting all the problems to be solved in that way is lofty. We still don't know what this run game is actually going to look like. Like, they basically kind of had to abandon it in any game that was legitimately competitive that they were playing down the stretch, because they just could not rely upon any early down yardage. And they've been over reliant on the RPO game because they don't feel like they can get true drop back protection for their quarterback to be able to push the ball downfield. And I think, and Steven, I know you and I have kind of talked about this. Sheil, I know that like we talked about this going towards the end of the season. And it makes me concerned that if Patrick Mahomes is married to trying to push the ball downfield more often, and he's playing behind an offensive line that is not staying upright, that now you are risking this guy taking on some kind of injury or just getting too far beat up or starting to turn the ball over because he's got to push the ball earlier than he would like to. And those are the kind of things that dismantle what would otherwise be an effective, healthy, stable offense on a week-by-week basis. So until I see this week 1, week 2, week 3, there's no amount of training camp clips you can show me in one-on-ones for Josh Simmons that's going to make me believe that he's the guy already.
The fact that they led the league in RPOs, if that happens again this year, I think we're going to be talking about the Chiefs in the same terms we talked about them last year. Like, they could not get 4 yards on first down reliably, and the only way they could do it was doing the RPO stuff. And I think the RPO stuff is a reflection of the offensive line. Like, if you felt comfortable that this offensive line, which they have invested a lot of money, even going into this year after the Tooney move, they are second in terms of cap dollars allocated to the offensive line.
Wow.
And that $76 million in cap hits this year. So like,
I mean,
this
they
has
got
to,
Jalen Moore just kind of hanging out for like 15,
yeah, he might be a
plus
swing
$million
tackle again. Yeah.
You know,
they have a $15 million swing tackle perhaps. And like, if that's if they're running the RPOs as frequently as they did last year, it's going to be a problem. They have to be able to get to a spot where they can run the football, because I think that's the only way you really dictate the terms for the defense. Like, when you're an RPO team, the defense essentially gets to decide what you're going to do on that play. We could take away the pass and then you have to hand it off. Or you could take away the run and you have to pass it. And I just think the Chiefs have to get back to a spot where they're on the front foot and they're dictating terms for defenses. And they haven't been there since Tyreek Hill. And I know like part of it has been, oh, we're trying to find a Tyreek replacement. And they keep getting these undersized speedsters. But I think their main issue is they haven't had that guy on the outside that could just win one-on-one and has a catch radius. I think that's been the issue. When you look at explosive plays in the NFL, explosive pass plays, I think like 40% of them come on perimeter go balls. And they haven't had a guy there that is able to win on those routes. Their guy on those routes has been Justin Watson over the past couple of years, and he's gone.
Yeah, I love the point about, I didn't realize that about the O-line spending. And then I'm doing the math in my head. It's like, all right, Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. All right, those are great players.
Taylor, which has been like a bunk signing from
and
day
that was
one.
Aggressive at the time, by the way. That's not, that's not sort of second guessing. Both Jawan Taylor and then the Jalen Moore signing this offseason, we talked, it was like, wait a minute, they're pro scouts. They must are putting a lot of trust that they see something that Kyle Shanahan did not see by paying this guy. So maybe it'll work out. Hopefully Josh Simmons is healthy and plays great. I'm just saying, to what these guys said. Let's see it in a regular season, what it looks like. Yeah.
Let's wait. And then you got to also consider the fact that like Hollywood Brown got hurt in practice, hurt his ankle. Xavier Worthy is in concussion protocol after banging his head earlier practice a couple days ago. Rasheed Rice is looming suspension. And then you look at their wide receiver depth chart, because they've lost to Justin Watson, because Travis Kelce probably has 1.5 feet out of the door in the NFL. It's hard to find production if a guy like Rice is not available. It's going to be even more difficult to find production if someone like Hollywood Brown, who has had a bunch of lower body injuries that has forced him to miss time over the last few seasons, if he's got to miss time again, a guy that wasn't there for basically the entire regular season with the chest injury last year, it gets really tricky trying to put together a viable offense around a quarterback that we think could be the best one that we've ever seen in our lives. And we said it at the end of last season, and I'm saying it now. I want to see this guy get a just chance to be the kind of quarterback that we know he can be. And right now, the situation does not necessarily pretend itself in that direction.
I can't watch another version of this offense that we've seen over the past 2 years. I just don't want to see it.
6 yards,
It's not
average
fun.
depth of target. Yeah, I don't want to watch that.
They were unwatchable last year their games. I know they won a lot of games. They won 15 games during the regular season, but they were just so hard to watch. It was not appointment viewing as it had been for before 2023, the 4 years before that.
Because we've seen the A+ version. So, even if you come down to the B, whatever that version is, and again, they're still probably a top 8 offense statistically. They won 15 games. They got to the Super Bowl. So listen, no one's saying that they can't do that. And also, no one come in with it. Like if you pick the Chiefs to go to the Super Bowl this year, no one try to sell it like you're doing something, oh, no one's picking them. I don't want to hear that.
It's like Lakers fans. Oh, we believe in the Lakers. Nobody else thought we would do it. We would be here.
You're not doing anything that crazy by picking them to go to the Super Bowl. We're just talking about the offense, what we watched last year, and how it might look different this year. All right, take a break. We come back. I'll hit you with one nugget that caught my attention. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. The Anthony Richardson redemption tour is on the arc. Ruiz, I thought this was definitely going to be one for you. Maybe just being nice, welcoming me back from vacation and leaving it for me.
It was my second nugget. I was waiting.
Okay, your second nugget. All right, good. Then let's talk about it. So Zach Kiefer, great reporter in The Athletic, wrote a piece on Anthony Richardson. Some stuff caught my attention there. Richardson's healthy. He's practicing. He worked on his mechanics in the offseason. According to the reporting out of Indy, he's been more accurate in camp. But there were just some things in this that really caught my attention. And a lot of it was organizationally and what we've talked about with the Colts. Chris Ballard said in this piece, when you take a quarterback high, there's an expectation. The pressure to play the kid is real. And I've said we've had this conversation before, but where was the plan with this guy? We all knew he played 13 college games. He was 21 years old? Like any team that drafted this guy, you can go back to January of that draft cycle. Everybody agreed that if you're going to take a shot on his upside, and there is upside, there are physical tools, you need to have a very good plan for kind of getting him adjusted, getting him acclimated to life in the NFL, because he's not just going to come in and play great right away. And it just felt like reading this story that they had absolutely no plan. It kind of just confirmed it really from what I was reading there. Now, Richardson saying all the right things. I still kind of laugh at the whole idea of let's light a fire under him, and you're lighting a fire by paying Daniel Jones $14 million, and they're talking about a wake-up call and all this stuff. And I'm just like, I don't know, man. Can we, am I just being too soft? Can we just support? Can we just throw some support behind the guy, have a plan, and see if it works or if it doesn't work? So I don't know if it's going to work or if it's not going to work, but I guess if you still have a little morsel of belief in Anthony Richardson's tools, that at least for him, this has gotten off to a good start this summer, Ruiz.
I mean, if you watched him throw at the sticks, I understand why he refrained from doing so. The guy couldn't hit a pass under 5 yards, but it seems like his accuracy is better. He's showing up to practice a little bit early and going through the motions. I don't know if you saw those clips, Sheil. I know you're probably skeptical about those, given our conversation before the recording. But I do think that them bringing in Daniel Jones, I agree with you. I don't understand the spark thing. They're paying him $14.5 million. That is the 18th highest cap hit amongst quarterbacks in the entire NFL. He's getting paid more than Aaron Rodgers this year, Sam Darnold this year in terms of cap hit, not actual cash. Russell Wilson, he's getting paid more than Anthony Richardson is in terms of cap hit. So I do think you're creating this confounding situation where you're paying this guy more to be a backup in theory or just to be motivation for Anthony Richardson. But I think the thing that stood out to me is that Daniel Jones has been apparently really bad in camp and has failed to capitalize on what was a slow start to camp for Anthony Richardson by all accounts. But Anthony Richardson has been coming on in the last few days. I think on Saturday was his best practice, and he's kind of been stacking practices since then. So I do think they did go into this with the idea of having a fair competition, but it sounds like Anthony Richardson is at least winning that competition, which gives me more optimism for him going forward.
Diante, where are you at with this? Anthony Richardson, 2025. Now, they did say, the headline of the story was a make or break season for Anthony Richardson. That's not how the Colts see it.
Right.
And a lot of it was Chris Ballard saying, it's not just, this year we are having the long-term vision in mind. And even if it doesn't work out this year, we're going to stick with him next year. we'll see about that. But where are you with the potential for Richardson to kind of, develop this year and have a better season?
Well, I'll come back to what you said, right? Which was quoting Chris Ballard talking about the pressure to play him because he was an early pick. And like, I'm calling timeout on that.
Yeah,
come on,
totally.
man. I was there. We were all there for that draft. If there was one quarterback in that draft that actually did not have any expectations to show up and play immediately and be an impact player immediately, it was Anthony Richardson because he had so few college dropbacks. This was not like a Trey Lance thing, right? I think the Trey Lance situation was a little bit different because there was a brand of North Dakota State and Carson Wentz had been successful. So it's like, oh, this guy has shown polish, hasn't thrown a bunch, but we know that he can be something. With Anthony Richardson, everybody acknowledged from the gate, like, physical specimen, obviously has all the arm talent in the world, needs to clean up his footwork. And if that means he needs to sit for a year, I don't think any Colts fan would have been impatient with his developmental process, knowing what the promise of what this guy could be. What this really comes across to me as is like Chris Ballard and people in that organization kind of have the New York Times data viz of the approval rating up, and they're just checking it on like an hour by hour basis. And then they're going to give you whatever quote they feel like is going to swing it back in their favor. Because the Daniel Jones thing, like, it just reeks of that. Oh, we need a quarterback to push the guy. Okay, let's go get a veteran. Well, this guy's a veteran. Let's bring him in. It doesn't matter that he's always hurt. It doesn't matter that his arm talent is diminished. It doesn't matter that he has not shown himself to be a reliable quarterback or reliable option. That's going to be the guy we have compete with him. But we're also going to say in public that we're giving Anthony Richardson every chance. So it's just like you said, the messaging is all over the place. To interface with what we're actually seeing at training camp, though, it looks like he's in better shape than he's been, right? And sometimes I kind of roll my eyes at guys who are talking about how they've worked on their physique or made these changes physically. But you can look at him at the podium, you look at him at press availabilities. That looks like a guy that's clearly serious about his conditioning. And even if that's more like grandstanding because of the whole pulling myself out thing, and now I've got to make sure everybody knows I'm coming into training camp ready for that, I'm glad to see that because it does send the right message. And then like Steven said, if you're checking the ball down, I think he noted, and Jim Bob Cooter, their offensive coordinator, noted that it looks like he has more control over the ball. And a lot of that is because I think he's worked on his base. He's worked on his footwork. He understands that he doesn't have to throw every pitch at 95 miles per hour to be effective, right? And I think that as long as he continues to grow on those things, that actually kind of walks down what he has to be this year. If we see progress in those types of facets, once the bullets are actually flying, then I'm willing to kind of extend him. It would be different if he came up to training camp not in shape or he was still having the exact same problems. Then it's like, all right, dude, you got to figure it out, right? It's kind of like a Pierre get off the pot thing. But the fact that he's working at it, I'm willing to kind of extend this grace period and see exactly what it's going to look like. And I'm interested to see how they handle the preseason and whether or not these guys are going to be taking active reps in games as part of this quarterback competition, because I would like to see what these two look like juxtaposed with one another.
Let me ask you this. If I tell you I have a crystal ball and it tells me that the Texans are not going to win the AFC South, and you have to pick another team who you think would win if the Texans do not, on July 30th, as we record this, obviously can change your mind between now and week 1, but on July 30th. The reason I'm asking the question is because I do look at the supporting cast and it's like the offensive line's okay. You got Jonathan Taylor, got Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs and Tyler Warren. I'm not saying it's going to be Brock Bowers, but maybe it's like, I don't know, is 9-8, 10-7? If Anthony Richardson makes a nice leap, is it totally out of the question? So, all right, I'll just say I would pick the Colts over the Jaguars and the Titans right now if I had to answer that question.
I think I would pick the Jags just because I know for a fact
I'm taking the Jags.
They have a good quarterback. I know for a fact they have a good quarterback. I don't know what the Colts quarterback is going to look like.
See, I was going to take it for another reason. I'm taking the Jags because I know that they have a good play caller. Not that I don't think that Trevor is talented. Right now, I trust Liam Cohen as a play caller much more than I trust Shane Steichen, something I never would have imagined saying after 2021 and 2022. But it has taken them so long to kind of download this offense around Anthony Richardson in a way that has been effective. I would say with Trevor Lawrence, there's been a lot of, even while he had the same staff with Doug Peterson, 1 year it's RPOs and a bunch of man beaters. And then the next year we're going under center, doing these 7 and 9 step drops and trying to, take the top off the defense all the time. I think that having Liam Cohen there, I feel a lot more trust with Jacksonville. I do think that the depth chart in Indianapolis is a little bit better, but I'll take Liam Cohen and I'll take what I think Trevor can be over Shane Steichen, who I don't trust right now, and Anthony Richardson that I absolutely am not going to bank on at all.
I think there's a little,
right at this moment.
I think there's a little recency bias there with the play callers.
That's fair.
Because you just saw Liam Cohen coming off having one of the best offensive lines in the league. We know what we thought of Shane Steichen when he had one of the best offensive lines in the NFL.
I am in, let's see you do it again, Liam Cohen territory. Now, I think it was great last year. I'm not diminishing that, but I'm with you. Let me see you do it again. Could have very good wide receivers down there, but to Ruiz's point, if you don't have the offensive line, makes life a little bit harder. Can you scheme it up? So who knows? Maybe we'll get some AFC South fireworks this year. All right, Diante, what do you have? What's your next nugget?
I want us to go to the NFC North really quick and just kind of get your guys' sense of what we've heard about the young quarterbacks there, right? Caleb Williams early in camp having some trouble, I think, kind of being able to communicate the offense in the huddle. That he's had some turnover issues on a couple of days. And then with JJ McCarthy, the ball's been on the ground a bunch, right? You have the Justin Jefferson quote where he's out saying like, hey man, this guy's not a veteran. He's effectively a rookie. I'm not putting veteran expectations on this guy. It's going to take some time. So I kind of wanted to see how you stack your expectations for the Vikings versus the Bears, and then for each quarterback in their respective situations, and I guess quasi year ones for both of these guys.
Man, it's those are also two. I just mentioned who was the team I was saying earlier that's tough to figure out that we were talking about. I can't even remember who it was, but I put both these teams. Yeah, the Rams. That's right. Yeah,
that's right.
I put both these two teams in that category. Man, I'm looking at the Bears going. Ben Johnson really was terrific with the Lions. I see the pieces around Caleb Williams. I think their defense has a chance to be pretty good, but the Bears, I'm almost like, I don't want to get fooled again. I think I was high on them going into last year. It didn't work out. That was a mistake on my part. And then the Vikings, I mean, you look up and down the roster. If you just look at a depth chart or just a starting lineup and go on our lads, like, man, there's a lot to like about that Vikings roster. And they won a lot of games last year. So I think both teams have a chance to surprise and make the playoffs. I don't know that I'll be confident that it's really going to work with either quarterback to the degree where when you talk to me in a month, I'll be predicting that it is going to happen. So I'm kind of in wait and see mode. I don't know that I see the path towards both of them having good seasons this year with the coaching, with the pieces around them, but I don't have the confidence to say I feel great about it and it's definitely going to happen. So I don't know where that leaves me, Ruiz. I feel like do you expect sort of a breakout from Caleb Williams in his second season, or are you still like, let's let these pieces around him prove themselves a little bit?
I think I do expect it, but that's not just an expectation for Caleb. That's an expectation for the moves they made. I like the offensive line moves they made. Obviously, compared to last year, anything was going to look like an improvement over their offensive line, but it's also an expectation for Ben Johnson. And I think like one issue with like kind of interpreting these training camp performances and you're comparing them across the league is like coaches have different standards for what they are seeing on the field. And it seems by all accounts that Ben Johnson has been really, really adamant about them getting everything right down to the detail. And so what seems like a bad camp for Caleb could be a good camp elsewhere because the coach has lower expectations for the offense. So it's tough. And then with JJ, I'm kind of not surprised the ball's hitting the ground a lot just because of how that offense and that passing game operated. It was a very high degree of difficulty passing game. I know I questioned Sam Darnold throughout last year, but his throwing ability was beyond reproach. Like we know the guy can make the throws. And I think that's the question mark with JJ McCarthy. But like without being there, it's kind of hard to say because we don't know what kind of throws he's making. If they're running like we're holding your hand offense and the ball's still hitting the ground, then I'm concerned. If they're really,
that's an issue.
If they're really pushing him and running a similar style of offense that you were running with Sam Darnold, then it's not a big deal to me at all. And maybe it's impressive or a good sign that they are running that style of offense and they don't feel the need to hold his hand through this training camp. So it's really hard to say, but like in terms of expectations beyond what we're hearing out of camp, it's really hard because I have more faith in Caleb's talent, but I have more faith in the infrastructure around JJ McCarthy just because I've seen Kevin O'Connell do it in Minnesota and do it with these pieces and we know what he has. But yeah, I'm expecting both players to play well. Like at the end of the year, I expect both to be in the top half of the league in terms of passer rating. I don't know if that equates to I consider both of them top half of the league quarterbacks, but I think they are in systems that on paper could boost their production.
I don't know if saying they could swing the league is too far, but they certainly could sort of.
I
think they can
because that's like the most competitive division, and we have championship content. Like the Lions are a championship contender until proven otherwise. I know they have a lot of question marks going into next season. The Packers are definitely, in my estimation, an NFC championship contender, and then the Vikings. Last year they could have easily won the NFC, and if the Bears take the leap that we all expect, they weren't far. They were like a Hail Mary away from being 5-2, if I recall correctly, and lost a lot of games on the last play. So, like, I don't think that's an exaggeration at all.
Yeah, you got a few guys like that. I could even, Michael Penix. There are just some unknowns there, especially in the NFC, where, hey, if one of these quarterbacks makes a leap, surprises us, whatever, they could be the story in the NFL once we even get to week 6, week 7, week 8, whatever. All right, Ruiz. What do you got? What's the next nugget that caught your attention?
We talked about them earlier. I'm going to Jacksonville, where Travis Hunter, they're actually doing the thing. And like, I am excited to see them do the thing, but it sounds like they at least have a good plan in place. And what they're doing right now is they're putting him, if he's working with the offense during special team drills, then he does some defensive drills on the side and vice versa. So far, day 1, wide receiver, day 2, wide receiver. He got 2 straight days of cornerback after that, and then went right back to wide receiver. It seems like they're pushing him towards the offensive side, and the defensive side is going to be a secondary type thing. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I think he's a better cornerback than a wide receiver, but I understand the thinking that if you're an explosive wide receiver and he does fill in those gaps in his game, that he could become a game-changing player. Whereas a corner, it's harder to impact a game like a wide receiver can. But I'm just excited that, one, that they're trying to do this, and 2, through a week and a half so far, he hasn't tapped out. And it seems like the guy's stamina, he's just built different. Like, I don't know how else it's hard to analyze with like past examples, because we've never seen anything like this outside of like Pat Ricard and Scott Matlock, who were like defensive tackles and fullbacks. So it's going to be fascinating to watch, but it sounds like it's so far so good.
Yeah. It's, I ripped them, or one of my takeaways after the draft was like, I want Travis Hunter to be awesome. I want to see him do something nobody else can do. And I don't have faith in this organization to have a plan for him to be able to do that, because they've had, the fewest wins in the NFL since Shad Khan took over. And so the infrastructure has been bad. Now, I'm with you. It's encouraging what we've seen so far. It does feel like there was a plan in place. Here's how we're going to handle this. If we're going to draft this guy, here's what it's going to look like. Let's make sure we're not doing anything, day by day, almost rep by rep, maybe drill by drill, whatever it is, from now until we get to the regular season, to figure out what he can do and what he can't do. So I'm with you. It remains one of the most exciting storylines in the NFL. It's just picturing week 1, what does this guy look like? And I sort of get, based on the conversation we just had, why you would want him on offense a little bit more if you feel like your path to being a good team is for the offense to be good. If Liam Cohen's like, I can scheme this up. I did it last year, and I have Brian Thomas Jr. and Trevor Lawrence is healthy. And hey, we got to scheme around an offensive line that might have issues. You know what would help with that? If I had Travis Hunter as my other wide receiver. So they might be like, hey, let's get some turnovers on D. It might not look great. We might not be great. They were bad last year, but let's get this offense going. That's our path towards success. So Diante, I'm excited. There's no doubt about it. Just in terms of like stuff I'm looking forward to in week 1 of the NFL season, that's high on the list for me.
1,000%. I think Stephen worded it perfectly, right? The biggest thing was that we were able to get to training camp, and he wasn't immediately like, all right, this is too much. The coaching staff didn't come right out the gate saying, all right, we were idiots for even thinking that we could do this in year 1 of a guy's career. We need to kind of tamp this down. The fact that they've been able to get through a week and a half up to this point of practices, and they don't feel terrible about it, and they're going to try this out in a scrimmage, I think, at the end of this week. That's something I'm really going to be locked in on, is what we hear, what we see from this Jags scrimmage, where he's going to be playing on both ways. I think Liam Cohen kind of worded it as like, this is our temperature check for how much he can retain on the defensive side of the ball. I think they must feel pretty good about what they've asked of him as a slot receiver, or just as a receiver, period. And they probably really want to get a gauge of, can you actually be a man corner when you're playing a bunch of offense? Can you remember all this different stuff in terms of your role in the defense after you had full drives offensively? What are you retaining? What can you go out and replicate consistently? So that's something I'm going to have my eyes on. I will say, the skeptic in me, I think it's nice. It's nice to believe that they have this grand plan for why he's starting out on offense and taking his time defensively. The truth of the matter is that they had a bigger need for a number 3 receiver than they did for a number 2 corner. They brought in Jordan Lewis to play in the slot. So their defensive backfield is probably a little just more stable than the wide receiver room outside of Brian Thomas. And maybe that's for the better, right? Like, because Travis Hunter can be a dynamic athlete, maybe getting him in early on the offensive side of the ball. You get the ball in his hands, probably on a bunch of screens and RPOs, the same way we saw Tampa Bay taking advantage of their slot receivers, especially Chris Godwin before he got hurt last year. And that might be enough. And that's kind of what I've been expecting. I'm just fascinated to see what it looks like on the other side of the ball, man. I'm not concerned at all about what an athlete like Hunter can do offensively. It's going to be more about what he is or is not as a corner that's going to paint the picture for what a two-way player in the NFL can even look like, because this is not even something I've ever had to conceive of before this guy got drafted.
I feel like the Liam Cohen part is a good point that I kind of overlooked, that you have this guy that has proven, he proved it for 1 year, but he did prove that he's able to generate targets and touches and space and put guys in the right position. And if you have a receiver who isn't taking on a full load and maybe doesn't understand the nuances of the position yet, like, that's the perfect play caller to have. And then another thing that stood out to me was, I think it was a month ago, I don't know when he said it, but Travis Kelce was saying, like, oh, if he's playing both sides and he's on defense, we're targeting him with go balls. So he has to run, I think was the implication. And if that's happening and teams are like going out of their way to kind of make Hunter's day a living hell, I feel like the Jaguars are already won. You guys are altering your strategy.
Yeah, I'm breaking your game plan.
So I don't know. I feel like this is going to work out. But my question to you guys both is, at what point, like, if he's still doing this in week X, will you believe, okay, this is going to be a thing all year long? And I'm buying into it. I feel like Diante needs more convincing than Sheil at this point.
When do they see the Chiefs? Is that week 5?
You're saying the Chiefs are going to break
if he's
them?
doing...
I'm saying if we can get, it's October 6th. So yeah, that'll be about the 4th, 5th week of the year. If we can get through a solid month, if I have a representative sample size of at least a month to kind of gauge exactly how much usage he's getting on both sides of the ball, and he's through that, then you might get a little bit of belief out of me. Before then, I'm going to be coping. I want everybody to know, all of the Colorado fans, all of the Coach Prime fans that have been beating me down for my Shador takes and how I feel, how I've been skeptical of Travis Hunter, I'm going to be coping all of September. If the guy puts up 120 yards, 2 touchdowns, and gets 2 PBUs, I'm going to blame the opponents. I'm not going to credit Travis Hunter. I just want this to be out there in the open. I'm going to be as honest as possible, man. I'm not believing until we get a month into the year.
Yeah, I mean, 4 to 6 weeks, I would be like, if he's able to do it for that period, then I would be like, all right, let's see. It's like a streak. Let's see, can he do it another week? Obviously, see how the team is doing. How is he performing on both sides of the ball? Are they sticking with it that entire time? So yeah, intriguing storyline. No doubt about it. All right, take one more break. We come back. We'll get to a few more training camp nuggets. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. All right, mine, I'm going back to the NFC North. And Matt LeFleur is getting feisty. I don't know how much attention you guys have been paying to this, but this caught my attention. The Athletics' Matt Schneidman had a terrific practice report detailing what happened. There was a little, fight, O-line, D-line, Rasheed Walker, the offensive tackle, versus Kingsley Enagbari, kind of threw him to the ground. And in Schneidman's words, Matt LeFleur snapped. He was his quote, he was enraged, perhaps more so than I've ever seen in my prior 6 seasons covering him. So he makes Rasheed Walker take a lap. 4 other players join Rasheed Walker, show a little unity on the offensive side of the ball. They take a lap with him. But it's not just that one thing. LeFleur kicked cornerback Nate Hobbs out of practice for a low hit. And then this might be my favorite one. He pointed out that Tucker Kraft's ball security needs to be better in a press conference, and Tucker Kraft couldn't hide that he was just, disgusted by this, pointing out to reporters that this is going to grind Diante's gears, that defenders can punch the ball out, but he's not allowed to use a stiff arm. And so, of course, they're going to be able to punch the ball out, Kraft said. And so he was asked about, LeFleur kind of calling him out. And he said, that's just a yes, sir, no, sir mentality with coach at this point. You want to obviously keep the ball in the offense's possession as long as possible. Bus fine, in my opinion, whatever. And they followed up, bus fine. What does that mean? And he said, throwing somebody under the bus, which he just did that to me, Kraft said lightheartedly. So interesting Packers camp so far. I was thinking about LeFleur, and I think we all agree he's one of the better coaches in the NFL. You go to his Pro Football Reference page, you'll probably just be shocked. Like, oh my gosh, this guy every season is good with different quarterbacks. He goes from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. But then I was thinking about how we talk about Kyle Shanahan so differently, where it's like, great coach, hasn't won it yet. It's wearing on him. And I was just wondering, is there a little bit of that with LeFleur? Like, he's won a lot of games, but he hasn't been to a Super Bowl. Is the intensity ratcheted up a little bit? And maybe it's wearing on him. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just a regular training camp. But I did like to see a little bit of the personality, the anecdotes with Matt LeFleur and what's happening at Packers camp, Diante.
I'm with you. I'm not even going to interface with that Tucker Craft quote. Hey, man, the practice rules, buddy. I'm sorry. Forcing a turnover is much more valuable than your stiff arm. You're just going to have to deal. All right. We got to get our work in on the defensive side of the ball. I will say, though, the thing that I was kind of pondering as you were speaking, Sheil, is like how fascinating a situation it is to be as a coach when you have a young but very talented team and you might feel like these guys need to grow up and turn a corner. Right. And that's not to say that like all of the Packers are immature, but I think if you're looking at the fact that they haven't been able to close games against the better teams that they've seen, we saw that often last year, even when Jordan Love was healthy, they kind of struggled being able to beat some of the better teams. I would say maybe their highest quality win on the year was when they went out and beat the Rams, if I remember right. And that was relatively early in the season. I think that for me and what I'm looking for is a quarterback going to take, the reins of this thing? They have a really young defense, so it's not like Seattle, right? Sheil, back in the Legion of Boom days, where you have Russell Wilson as this very fresh face trying to figure out exactly what he wants to be as a quarterback with this already established identity and these strong personalities defensively that can lead the way, right? I'm sure that if you're Matt LeFleur, you're probably feeling like, hey, man, we know we're good enough to be able to go out and compete with Philadelphia because we did it twice last year. Right? Like we did it twice last year and turnovers got in our way in the second game when we were injured, but we should feel like we could have done to them what Los Angeles did to them in the divisional round. And if that's going to happen, I do think that you probably do have to kind of crank up the intensity at practice. So I'm really fascinated to see if that changes the mentality and the approach for them the rest of the way. Right? Like I'm going to be listening and talking to my buddy Justice Mosqueda about quotes coming from players out of practice. Right? Like we've heard about Miami talking about changing their culture and trying to be very serious about trying to compete. I wonder if the Green Bay players see it the same way.
I'm going to side with Tucker Craft just because I've been on the wrong side of a training camp zinger from Matt LeFleur. I think it was like 2 years ago. I asked him about Jordan Love and Diante just mentioned Justice Mosqueda. He actually clipped the thing. He's my friend and he wanted to make fun of me. But I asked him, I said, Jordan Love looks more confident. I think they just had played a preseason game. I said, it's the most confident he's looked since coming here. And then LeFleur just ripped. He was just like, how would you know? Like you weren't. Yeah. Like I've been here the whole time. He looks just as confident as he always has, which is fair. Like I didn't take offense to it. Next week he goes, he says, Jordan Love looks more confident than ever. I was so pissed. But I totally agree with Diante. Like, and it goes back to my point about Ben Johnson and like the standard that he's setting for the Bears. I feel like that's what's happening here in Packers camp. Like they need to get their shit together. And I feel like they left so many games on the floor just by not doing the little things, not making and not avoiding big mistakes and big moments. And we saw that in the Eagles game. So if they're going to make the leap, I think they just have to be a more disciplined team. So it makes sense that LeFleur's taking this approach this year.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good happening there. Matthew Golden has looked good. Elton Jenkins is in camp. Jordan Love is healthy. So there's a lot of good happening there. But entertaining training camp, it feels like so far in Green Bay. All right, let's do one more each if you guys have any leftovers here. I got a couple, so I'm happy to go too. But Diante, you got one more nugget for me this week?
I'll package a couple up because it's kind of following the same storyline in the NFC East. We can just kind of check in on the contract situations with the Commanders and the Cowboys. You haven't been here to rail against Jerry Jones in a little bit. So, I wanted to make sure I opened up the floor for you to rip Jerry for his comments about Michael Parsons missing some time last year and that possibly being the reason why they're not in a hurry to pay the guy. And then obviously in Washington, you have Terry McLaurin, who just reported to training camp this week after basically taking the first week off. And I know he's kind of holding in and trying to work out his contract situation. So I guess I'll frame this as, which of these two do you think gets done first? And do you think that either of these guys get exactly the market value that they're after?
I would probably say Parsons. The thing about the Parsons contract is it should not be difficult.
No, it's not difficult.
That's what we were saying last week. It's like, he complicates
the contract is written for you already.
Why does he complicate these situations? I don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this one I really don't understand because it almost feels like they're going out of their way to antagonize some of their best players. And Micah Parsons has been incredible for them. So I don't even have a rant in me on this one, Diante. Honestly, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know if I should feel bad for him or if like what's going on there. I just don't understand what he's doing. But we've seen how these play out before. They eventually get done. Their stars don't walk out the door, and I think that's what will happen with Micah Parsons. And it almost this summer, especially, it almost feels like there's an understanding of I can just picture, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, whoever else, like they kind of have the understanding that we have about who Jerry Jones is and how he operates, where it's almost like, Micah Parsons just showed up to camp and he's like, all right, yeah, I understand who I'm dealing with here. It's okay. So I feel like that'll get done. The McLaurin one is probably a little trickier, but I still feel like that too, they'll find some sort of agreement. I would be shocked if that one, carried over into the regular season or they thought about trading him or anything like that. I feel that way about almost every contract situation this time of year. I mean, if you just look at it historically, the number of words we spend discussing these things in the spring and the summer, and Trey Hendrickson even shows up today to Bengals camp. So I feel like most of them eventually get to a place where the player shows up for the team they're playing for. Ruiz.
Yeah. Mike is going to sign his deal like Wednesday before the first Thursday game. That's like how it happens. I think it happened with Dak Prescott last year or 2 years ago? I don't remember when he signed, but the McLaurin one is tricky because one, I think he's the best. He's obviously the best skill player on the team, but two, he means something to that franchise that kind of predates this new ownership group. And I wonder how that kind of gets factored in. Like when he resigned last time, it was like all they had. It was like, all we have is Terry McLaurin right now. We got to pay him no matter what. And he's just been the consummate professional. Like you hear the players talk about him, you hear the coaches talk about him. I just don't see why they are stringing him along at all. If I was them, I would be in a rush to pay him. I get that he's getting up there, he's getting closer to 30s. He's going to command a lot of money, and then you got to think about Jaden Daniels' contract down the line and all that. But with him, this seems just as much of a no-brainer as the Micah Parsons thing. I know he's not that type of player, but what he means to you in the locker room, I don't know why it's gotten into August.
Yeah, if I'm Terry McLaurin, I might be a little annoyed because I'm like, hey, don't wait until you get to me to all of a sudden be concerned about how much you're paying a 30-plus-year-old NFL vet. You guys had no problem handing out money to all the other vets that are going to be playing on this team. You know, so don't take your time with me now. I do think in some ways it's almost even to me in terms of trying to sort out who will get signed first. Because I think about Adam Peters as GM and coming from San Francisco. And obviously we've talked a lot about San Francisco and how they handle their negotiations, and they're never in a rush to do these extensions. And I think that a lot of this is just kind of the way that they operate. They're never going to be hurried up in their timeline. I think if there is going to be a hang up, it ultimately comes down to, right, to use like a real estate as an analogy, what exactly like his comparable value is for Terry McLaurin, right? Like, who do you view as his peers? Do you view him in the same breath that you would view a Tyreek Hill on this side of his 30s, a Mike Evans on this side of his 30s, a Devontae Adams, right? Those guys who are going to get about, 15 or so million guaranteed per year and about 20 to 25 per year overall in terms of their cap figure. And I think if I'm Terry McLaurin, I want to get as close to the top of that market as possible, right? You're not going to pay him exactly what you gave some of the younger guys, right? Like DK Metcalf's contract extension, I don't think should really factor into this, even though Terry McLaurin, I think, is a more reliable number one receiver than DK has been. Obviously, you've got an age advantage there. But I think if I'm Terry McLaurin, I should be able to go in and ask for 45 to 48 million over the next 2 years, guarantee me 15 million per year, and I'll be able to show up to camp for that. For Micah Parsons, I mean, I'm shrugging this off the same as you, Sheil. The contract's written already. honestly, if I was the Cowboys salary cap guy, the saying that the TJ Watt deal got done, I know he just had to throw his head back and just scream at the ceiling. It's like, oh my God, now we've got to start this thing
right.
all
Why
over
didn't you
again.
listen to me, Jerry?
Yes.
I told you.
We could have done this 3 months ago after the Myles Garrett deal. And really, you have Myles Garrett and Nick Bosa's deal to use as your framework before the TJ Watt deal. And now a guy who's older and worse than Micah Parsons can say, hey, if they can pay him $110 million guaranteed, basically, you definitely got to do that for me. Right. And that's just over 3 years for a TJ Watt. So he should be able to blow that NFL record for non-quarterback contracts out the water. And I think that all of this just comes down to a bunch of bluster, which we know Jerry Jones is an expert at making himself the center of attention for this. And I wouldn't be surprised at all. Like Steven said, no deal throughout the preseason, first week of the year. They come to practice on Tuesday. Contracts on the table, he signs it, and we can just say, all right, this guy set the record, and we can move on now.
No, Jerry's different.
Yeah, that's the
thing you have to realize. Jerry's different. Never mind the fact that everybody that they ends up signing for an above market rate deal, but Jerry does it differently.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, it works out for the players.
6-year contract. After the 6-year deal for Ezekiel Elliott, he can never tell me again about how shrewd of a negotiator he is.
No, it always works out for the player because, if you're the player, now maybe you're annoyed by him, but the longer you wait, to Diante's point, other deals get done. And now your price is just going higher. I mean, like if Michael
CeeDee Lamb got to wait for Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
It was just like, give me $1 million less and I'll show up. And that's basically what happened.
They built that facility, the Star, whatever they call it. I think it's in Frisco or whatever. And like they use it as like a thing, like this is like a amenity for players, and they'll take less money because they have these business opportunities. There's like a lot of businesses that work out of there and they introduce them to players and all that stuff. So it can help you. And I feel like Jerry built that thing and paid all that money for that and really just wants to leverage it in one contract. He wants to get one below market deal just so he can like, see, it was a great investment. I think he's forcing the issue.
Yeah. Who knows? I'll be shocked if it didn't get done. All right, Ruiz, what do you have? What's your last one here?
My last nugget is that there is no nugget coming out of Pittsburgh. We joked about this before the show, but there's been no turmoil in Pittsburgh. Apparently, Mike Tomlin called his relationship with Aaron Rodgers a bromance. And I want to be fair to Steelers fans. I want to be fair to Aaron Rodgers. Earlier, I think it was a couple months ago, whenever he signed, I said, if we get past the first week in training camp and there is no discussion of turmoil with him and Arthur Smith and who has control of the offense and audibles, that I will be a little more optimistic about the Steelers. And for a week and a half through, and there hasn't been anything like that. And Arthur Smith is apparently cooking. He's got Jonnu Smith playing running back in some reps. So I do think I hold some optimism for the Steelers offense that it's not going to be a bottom 10 unit, that it might be hover around league average.
So far, so good. Quiet, Rodgers had the response to the Bradshaw thing and all that. So we shall see. Like you said, you're true, a week in and no issues. Bromance. It has been sort of a quiet, other than like the contract stuff, it's been pretty quiet around a lot of the NFL. But yeah, Diante, are you giving it 2 weeks? Where are you with this?
Nobody's dropped a pass on 3rd and 6 yet. It's easy for it to be a bromance for now. Nobody has a reason to be cranky. We're all happy. We just traded for Jalen Ramsey and basically exchanged our other headache. So now we're clearing things out in this room. TJ Watt is paid and happy. Everybody's got all the reason in the world to be having a good time. Easy to feel that way in July. We will see in 3 weeks, let alone a month, where things stand.
Let me say this: they open up with the Jets, and then they played the Seahawks, and then they played the Patriots. That sounds like it could be a 3-0 start.
No,
if there's one thing the Steelers are good at doing, it's racking up wins to fool you into thinking that there's something that they're not.
I was thinking 1 and 2 when you read that out loud, personally, but we'll see. All right, my last one will end on a positive. Aiden Hutchinson looking great for the Detroit Lions via the Athletics' Colton Pouncey. They had a scrimmage this week. Hutchinson had at least 3 sacks, according to Pouncey, best player on the field. He's going up against Penei Sewell and winning his fair share of battles. So that Lions defense, the most injured defense in the NFL last season, obviously had the coordinator change, and you're just kind of wondering what's it going to look like here. I feel like there's some fatigue with the Lions, honestly, this year, where people are like, they've been a really good team, but are we going to pick them to get to the Super Bowl? I don't know. And I was just thinking like the margin for error for that offense to drop off a little can that be, accounted for with the defense being really good? And the defense was good last year, despite those injuries. But like Hutchinson, and then you have the safeties, Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph. Can you get something out of your corners? Like there's a blueprint there where it ends up being a pretty interesting defense. And Hutchinson looks like he did before the injury last year, where he looked like one of the best defensive players in football. So it's a good sign out of Detroit, who they've had some, injuries here and there on both sides of the ball. But I think just the fact that Hutchinson looks like this so far is a great sign for them.
1,000%. I mean, it was the most productive pass rusher in the league, I think like 2, 3, 4 weeks after he had broken his leg, right? And that speaks to just kind of how far ahead of pace he was and how effective he's been for this defense. So if he's back and moving anywhere close to what we saw last season, that is going to be a big boon for this defense. The biggest issue is just they've got to get to January healthy. After seeing what we saw last year, and we're already starting off training camp, no Taylor Decker, Aleem McNeil is down. They've got, you go in there, our lads, and they've got red lines through names all over the place. So you've got to just be a little bit concerned about what that's going to look like in season. Like you said, Sheil, as long as these guys hit the field, I do think that people are a little premature in moving on from Detroit, given the way that they looked in the playoffs. I don't know if that was an accurate representation of what we saw all year. Definitely wasn't an accurate representation of what we saw from them all season. I'm still pretty bullish on what this team can be. If Jameson Williams is anywhere close to the wide receiver that they drafted, that they thought they were drafting, this offense is going to be just fine, even with the losses up front to the offensive line. And defensively, I think a lot of this kind of weighs on Kelvin Shepherd's shoulders. But if all he does is copies and pastes what Aaron Glenn did, that was good enough for them to go 15-2 last year and basically be the best team in the NFL up until like the last couple weeks of the season.
Yeah, I definitely can see a situation where we're thinking, if they had last year's offense with this year's defense, like this, they would really have something going. But like the offensive line, the interior offensive line is what gives me pause, just because of how that affects Jared Goff, how that affects his pocket. We know he needs a clean pocket. We saw that in the Washington game. But I do think their ceiling last year was higher just because we had so much faith in that offense. And when you have a great offense like that, I think you have a higher ceiling just naturally, just because defense is just, it's volatile week to week. We can't count on it. And then one or two injuries, as we saw in Detroit, could take you down. So I'm still bullish on them. I want to ask you guys right now, make a pick in the NFC North. Are you guys taking Detroit or another team?
I'm still taking Detroit. I will say this is as close a margin as it's been since Ben Johnson took over as offensive coordinator. But I'm still taking Detroit, man. Like, I've got to see this offense take a step back before I jump off the bandwagon.
I feel like me and Sheil pick the Packers to win the NFC every year. Are you still on that train?
Yeah, I'll stick with it. Yeah, we definitely did. And we did that in the spring, I think. We did our NFC North. But I do feel the way Diante feel when, I just have my, preseason spreadsheet where I'm going through every team and trying to predict how many wins, and add it all up. And I went through the Lions thing and I'm just like, they still look like a Super Bowl contender to me, when you add it all up, that they've got that ceiling. I just think there's a bit of fatigue. I think the Packers are going to be really good too. So we'll see where I land once we see these injuries throughout and where everyone is at the end of August. But I think those are, two of the better teams in the NFC for sure. So we shall see. You're still with the Packers, Ruiz?
I'm going to stick with the Packers. But I do agree that the fatigue thing is definitely a factor with the Lions. Like we have a short attention span in the NFL media space. Yes. Like you don't do it for 2 years, you're done. Like we've written off Lamar Jackson's never winning a Super Bowl. The Bills are never winning anything. The Lions are done, apparently.
The Bengals are cooked. Everybody's done.
Yeah.
It's just going to be Chiefs and Eagles for the next 4 years.
All right, Diante, as promised. All right, so give me the background. What happened? The firestorm I missed online, and what is the question that I have to answer about Cam Newton and Jalen? Now, I will say, I'm an older guy. I don't have to partake, so I reserve my right, but I'm going to try to be a good, podcast partner here and answer the question. So go ahead, fill me in.
Okay. So again, there's a lot of exposition that's been tied to this because this thing has been so protracted, back and forth between Cam Newton and a bunch of people who are not Jalen Hurts, which is its whole other separate thing. But Cam has kind of made a big content thing out of ranking his top 10 quarterbacks. He usually does it before every season, in the middle of the season, and then throughout the playoffs. And I guess earlier in the year, in the wake of Philadelphia's Super Bowl victory, his comments at that time we're kind of tepidly that Jalen Hurts should be considered as being kind of in that elite class. And a lot of that was credit to, he doesn't turn the ball over. He shows up in the playoffs. Clearly there are some leadership skills and things of that nature, right? He does exactly what the team is asking him to do. I'm paraphrasing. I want to say, was this the beginning of June? God, it's been so long now. I don't even remember when the initial video came out, but he does an updated top 10 quarterbacks and Jalen Hurts is not on it. And he kind of said hey, man, we're talking about tools. We're talking about what guys can do on a snap-by-snap basis as throwers of the ball. What they're asked to do, I think, was really what he was harping on. And it's Jalen has the offensive line, the running back, the wide receivers, the defense that he does. And I will say, obviously I've been more sympathetic to Cam's position, but this is an objective truth that I think is being lost in this because people are attacking Cam. I did not really hear him insult any piece of Jalen Hurts' game when he was saying why he's not top 10. All he was saying is that the guy is not asked to do what Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow or Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen are asked to do. And I think that even when Steven and I were having our conversation, Jalen Hurts not being behind guys like Jordan Love and Jane Daniels, I think really kind of miffs Eagles fans given the team's success. So we established that as what was happening at the beginning. Ryan Clark, Dan Orlovsky, basically the entire national NFL media apparatus all come down on Cam. And it's the same thing you always hear. You didn't jump on the fumble. You got one hot year and then you never were able to do again what you did in 2015. He's a winner. You're not. So now Cam has been kind of shooting back at all these guys. I don't necessarily need your opinion on where you stand with that. That's just theater, typical social media theater.
Okay.
I want Sheil's. You don't have to give me a full top 10. I need to know if Jalen Hurts is in your top 10. And if you could cherry pick the absolute best of Jalen Hurts, how does that match up against the best of Cam Newton in your mind?
Okay. Well, listen, if I am actually asked to do a ranking, then I'm not going to do it right now.
I did a fake
specific
ranking
guidelines. And
while you were gone.
If we want to do that on a few, what's that?
I did a fake top 10.
Yeah, we gave you a fake we gave you a fake top 10.
I saw that. I was getting tagged on vacation. What's going on here? What did Ruiz do to me? So it didn't look that bad. Some of it, I'm oh yeah, I could tuck myself into that. So I don't know if anybody actually wants me to do that, but if you give me guidelines, is it expansion draft? Is it with their team right now? Is it accomplishments? Then I'll be happy to do that on a future episode.
League average NFL roster. You've got this guy for
a season,
the 18 weeks of the season. Yep.
Okay. I'm going to give it some thought. I'm not answering on the fly. Listen, I live here. I got neighbors, I'm coaching the girls softball. I'm not crazy. Okay. I'm not doing it. So I will give it some thought and can answer it in a future episode. I think at the peak of their powers, I think Cam Newton, that 2015 season, I would take over the best we've seen out of Jalen Hurts so far. Looking at Cam Newton just recently for something, just his pro football. I forgot how short-lived sort of the injuries taking a toll and then him moving on. And I remember he had the one season where I was very impressed because he was just checking. Ruiz, you probably can give me more details, but he wasn't able to throw the football downfield.
2018,
but he was still kind of making things work, offensively. So I think 2015 was kind of, that's kind of a one-of-a-kind player in a one-of-a-kind season where I don't know that we've seen that, that level that high from Jalen Hurts yet. Now, Jalen Hurts was in the MVP running for one season. He's been to 2 Super Bowls. He won a Super Bowl. I think there are a lot of things that Jalen Hurts does well. And I am kind of it has been a weird offseason for the Jalen Hurts discourse. I feel just coming off of a Super Bowl, the conversations around him. So I'm sympathetic to that. Now, I think when you look at entire career accomplishments down the road, he definitely has a chance, I think, to have a better career than Cam Newton when you take longevity and everything into account. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I think you answered it honestly.
Powers,
I think you answered that honestly and earnestly. And it's funny, I think that Jalen Hurts is just so emblematic of all the trappings of trying to talk about quarterbacks in the NFL, period. He and Brock Purdy have just been the exact kinds of quarterbacks that are going to have everybody tripped up on a year-by-year basis. And the fact that he won now is obviously, I think, just kind of magnified that. And then winning in Philadelphia, so now you've got this big national fan base who's loud and wants beer. I think the biggest thing has probably just been for me that there are a lot of Eagles fans who want the rest of the league to bend the knee, which I get. I totally get. because a lot of people had a lot to say after 2023 and the disaster that they were down the stretch and coming back and winning a championship. So I get that point. I do just think that people get so hung up on not necessarily knowing which guidelines, to your point, Sheil, they actually want to evaluate these quarterbacks by.
Yeah. And the debate just got weird. It ended up being like the 2015 Panthers were one of the best teams of all time, and they were loaded, and they had Mike Tolbert, who was an all-pro, and never mind the fact that he was a fullback. It was just a weird discussion that I think was so detached from reality, but it speaks to your point, Diante. It's like very difficult to talk about Jalen Hurts in very objective terms. Either you're underrating him or you're overrating him. I feel like he's one of the hardest quarterbacks to evaluate just because of the situation he's in. I'm not taking anything away from his performance, especially in the Super Bowl. He was lights out in the Super Bowl, was lights out in the NFC Championship game. Don't think that eliminates the first 18 or so weeks of the season when even Eagles fans were questioning him. I was on the Eagles Reddit, scrolling. So I know what you guys were saying. Don't play that game with me. I can bring up the receipts.
Well, it reminds me, like, I do understand a fan base defending their guy. You know what I mean? Like I was that guy with Donovan McNabb in high school going like, look, man, look at what happened when he got Terrell Owens, and now look at his numbers, and look, he's throwing at James Thresh. Like that was me as a middle schooler, high schooler, early years of college. It's just so different now because I'm yelling that at friends in person. Now I'm showing how old I really am. And now it's like Cam Newton puts out a video, and now like our producer for Ringer's Philly Special, Cliff was telling me that just like he's on vacation and his group chat's just going crazy about this. And he's like, everybody go outside, take a walk, touch grass. We don't need to be arguing about this right now. So it's just a very different environment with those debates now. Yeah. For the worse, probably, but also we're in the content game. So maybe for the better for us and putting food on the table. We can't complain. So there you go. We got to it. Diante promised you. We did it. And we'll see if we have to continue this in future episodes with rankings. Please no. Okay.
It is July 30th.
It's over.
We are turning over into real NFL season.
Once the season starts.
Let's bury this here.
There we go. All right. Thank you to Diante Lee and Stephen Ruiz. Thank you to Christopher Sutton for producing. Kiera Givens on social. I'm Sheil Kapadia. We'll talk to you next time on the Ringer NFL Show. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York.